Our next panel is titled Show Up, Stand Up, Speak Up, and I think we all do that in our work, but I'm excited to hear what our panelists have to say. Gene Karpinski is actually not here to moderate. He's with the League of Conservation Voters, so Chip Cummins is going to step in for him. Thank you, Chip. And joining Chip will be the fabulous filmmaker, Luis Soyos. He's also the executive director of the Oceanic Preservation Society. We have David Yarnold, who is president and CEO of the National Audubon Society, and Sally Cox, founder and president of the Bonobo Conservation Initiative. Thanks.
So here we are, right about at the end of our run for AREDAY 15, and thank you. And we are, I'm not Gene Karpinski, and he certainly is one of the most venerable moderators of all time, and being the CEO of the League of Conservation Voters is very, very much engaged in moving the political needle and in the direction of conservation, obviously. So we're really here to talk about conservation, and whether it's from a national Audubon perspective or from the perspective of protecting the bonobo in Africa, or from the perspective of endangered species and species extinction. And everybody, I think you know who's up here, but just to refresh, David Yarnold, who is the president and CEO of the National Audubon Society, Sally Cox, who is an AREDAY alumni for many years and runs the Bonobo Conservation Initiative, trying to preserve the heart of the left lung of the planet down there in the Congo. Very important work that Sally's doing by protecting the bonobo and endangered species. And of course, Luis Hoyos. I'm pretty sure everybody was here last night for the movie, and if you weren't, too bad. But it really was an amazing film last night, and we were packed. And so I just want to kick the conversation over into, you know, right now as we're heading towards Paris, as we're looking towards an election cycle in the U.S. in 2016, and a change of leadership there, and we're looking for leadership in Europe. You know, how can this movement, let's call it the conservation movement or the anti-extinction movement, you know, ignite, and how can we work together within our organizations to move this needle into where it needs to go? So let's start with David on the end there.
Sure. So individual voices matter. About a month ago, a congressman named Jeff Duncan from South Carolina out of nowhere popped up and offered an amendment that passed the House that basically prohibited the Fish and Wildlife Service from enforcing the most important legislation that protects birds. He had never acted on energy before. And all of a sudden he did that. So there was a lot of buzz in environmental circles about, we think Duke Energy might have been behind that. And there was just buzz. It was just people chattering. And we said, well, the hell with that. Let's write about it. Let's investigate it. We investigated it, and we found through Audubon magazine that Duke Energy had hired a lobbyist that had worked with Jeff Duncan to gut the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. He had never heard of this before. So we published the investigation, and then we turned to our members. This is the answer to your question, Chip. And we said, let Jeff Duncan know what you think. And this poor birther from South Carolina got 40,000 emails and said, oh, never mind. People matter. Individuals matter.
Well, that's exactly where we are, and you know, so Sally, maybe you can connect the dots with your work. I know you live inside the Beltway in Washington D.C., the epicenter of our NGO world, where we're trying to raise the bar, move the needle, and then how does your work in Africa connect into this conversation?
You know, I had prepared some slides. I'm not mic'd.
You're not mic'd.
So, but I can,
Well, you can just hold the mic if you can't.
Unless you want me to.
So do we have slides for? Okay.
I do.
Great.
If I'm,
Okay.
it's kind of a little bit of a rap. You want me to do it?
Only if you can do it in 3 minutes or less.
3 minutes or less? That's no fair.
I'm teasing. Go ahead. But we're very limited on time, so let's
Sure.
move it right along.
Basically,
I'm sorry, we have a hard stop today. We're trying to get everybody into town for the Rocky Mountain Institute event, so that is what's happening. And
okay. Well, I'll try to abbreviate my comments, but I liked the topic of this panel because raising awareness is really the reason why I ended up dedicating my life to protecting bonobos. Was at first my passion about bringing them and what they represent to light. So most people in the world still don't even know that bonobos exist, and they are our closest relatives on the planet, along with chimpanzees in very different and fascinating ways. I will try to shorten my remarks, so forgive me if I kind of zip through a few slides. I just wanted to start off with a little story. When I first went to the bonobo habitat, which was 21 years ago, I was fascinated and I wanted to learn all I could, not only about bonobos, but about the human culture that surrounded them. I learned the local language, and I was particularly fascinated in the indigenous legends that were linked to taboos against hunting the bonobos. One of my favorites goes like this. One day, a man went for a long journey in the forest. He walked so long and he ran out of food and he fell down weak from hunger. And a bonobo saw him and he thought the man was sick and he wanted to help the guy. So once he checked him out, he realizes, well, this guy isn't sick, he's only hungry. So the bonobo went into the forest and gathered some of his favorite foods, such as bea, bacau, bolingo, and basenda, and he brought them back to the man. And the man tried bonobo's food for the very first time, and he found it was really good. So from that day on, bonobos are still eating bea, bacau, basenda, and batohe, and a variety of other foods and medicinal plants that they've learned about through the bonobos. So many people of the Congo forest know and have known for many, many generations that to kill a bonobo is like killing a member of your own family. It's bad blood or bad luck in their culture. And indeed, that's true. Bonobos share almost 99% of the same DNA with humans. They're more closely related to us than they are to gorillas. But still, most people don't even know they exist. So if you're among those who don't know much, I'll just quickly show you a little bit about bonobos. Their morphology is more like humans. They stand on 2 feet, walk bipedally more easily, more often than any of the other apes. They differ from chimpanzees insofar as their faces are flatter. They don't have that big brow ridge and jaw. They laugh and smile the way we do. This is the world's most famous bonobo, Kanzi, who broke the language barrier. Until then, we thought tool making was the dividing line. Jane Goodall blew that one out of the water, and Kanzi now has blown language out of the water. So there isn't a whole lot of dividing line. But the most fascinating thing about bonobos, and perhaps the most important, is their society and their sexuality. Unlike chimpanzees, which are our other closest relatives, chimps are a male-dominated society, patriarchal and competitive. They're the only primate other than humans that actually wages violent conflicts against others of their own kind, usually over territory and natural resources. Sounds pretty familiar, doesn't it? What most human wars are fought over. But bonobos, on the other hand, seem to exemplify the 1960s credo of make love, not war. They're the only primate other than humans that has sex for recreation and not just procreation, and they do so in pretty much any form or fashion, including with members of either gender. So I like to think of bonobos and chimps as representing really the yin and yang of human nature. And I think at this time, particularly on our planet, we humans would be wise to emulate the bonobo side of ourselves and learn how to share resources and cooperate rather than fighting to ensure our own survival. I first learned about bonobos when I was on staff at National Geographic Society working on a book about the great apes. And of course, I knew about the other three, orangutans, chimps, and gorillas, but I'd never heard of bonobos. And I was just blown away to learn about this closest relative who has so much to teach us about ourselves. So I quit my job determined to write about bonobos and try to bring them to light and help them that way. But the more I began investigating, I found there was really nothing being done to protect them. So in 1998, we founded the Bonobo Conservation Initiative. Bonobos are found in only one country, the Democratic Republic of Congo. They inhabit really the heart and the last bastion of the world's second largest rainforest, which, as you all know, is essential for mitigating climate change. About 20% of greenhouse gas emissions are from deforestation, so it's critical that we protect this forest, not only for that, but because of the watershed and all of the other ecosystem services it provides. Interestingly enough, recent research shows that bonobos actually disperse seeds in the forest of the trees that sequester the most carbon. So protecting them really helps every living thing on the planet. That's another view. So, but in the midst of all this untold beauty and natural riches, the Congo was the scene of some of the worst human atrocities known in history. From 1996 to 2003, it underwent back-to-back wars which took the lives of 5 million people, more than any war since World War II. And tens of thousands of women were raped as a weapon of war. So it was in this context, as the war was winding down, that we could finally start getting into the habitat and figure out, how are we going to save the bonobos? They are being hunted, that's the worst threat to them, and smoked for bushmeat, with displaced people who don't share those taboos that the ancient ancestors had passed down. We're coming in with arms. The bushmeat trade is really one of the only ways people can make a living because there's no infrastructure. So smoked meat is about one of the only commodities that people can carry for long distances to sell at market. Habitat destruction and the threat of industrial logging and agriculture, of course, also looms large. So we're really in a race against time to protect the bonobos themselves from hunting and their habitat, which is critical to all life on Earth. So we're trying to figure out, well, how are we going to do that? And we realized that, the only way to do it is if you engage the people who share that forest. And that's what we did. These are two of my closest and most important collaborators. And so we got together and started talking to people, leaders, scientists, people from the habitat. And they all said, a national park isn't going to work. People, where you draw a boundary and throw the people out. We need a different model. So that's how we developed the Bonobo Peace Forest, which is a constellation of community-managed nature reserves that's supported by sustainable development. So far, we've actually gazetted, officially protected 2 so far, which are comprise about 11,000 square miles. It's about the size of Massachusetts and Rhode Island combined. And there's a third on the way that we expect to legally protect next year. To create this large corridor of protection. You can see. The Peace Forest has been endorsed by President Kabila. Speaking of raising awareness, when we first got started, the leaders of the Congo didn't even know that bonobos were endemic to their country, nor that it was or that they were endangered, or that it was against international and their own national laws to kill them. So we've done a lot of awareness raising at all levels, most notably among local communities who have all banded together to create this vision. And they now have incorporated their own coalition, which has a political voice, which is very important as Congo forest laws are changing. So just a quickie on how we do what we do and how it's been successful so far. We really work on empowering the local people. If we do our job well, we'll work ourselves out of one eventually. So we train trackers who follow the bonobos in the forest and eco-guards who protect them. We exchange with the local communities, and we have co-created all of these solutions together We didn't go in with any preconceived notions. We used a system we called information exchange to build relationships and devise solutions together. Pilot health clinic, sustainable agriculture that reduces impact on the forest and increases yields. We actually founded a technical college that was just accredited a couple of years ago. Scholarships for women, we're very focused on women's group, microcredit, microenterprise, and we're working with We Can, Osprey and Sally's group on really helping to empower these women's groups and give them a bigger voice on the global scene. These three guys we call the Three Musketeers because they came and participated in some training we did at the Kokolo-Puri Bonobo Reserve, and they became inspired to go to their own communities, convince their people to stop hunting bonobos, and to create their own nature reserves. So in that way, the Bonobo Peace Forest is actually self-replicating or going viral, if you will. Loka Sola, one of the main leaders that I began the Kokolo-Puri project with years ago, has now been elected to Parliament as a result of our work together. And he has now really become a leader in green legislation in the Congo. If you want to learn more about our work, Empty Hands, Open Arms is for sale out there. That's the hardback. And this September, the same book by Denis Béchard, who did a beautiful job of telling our story so far, is coming out in paperback under a new title. The Peace Forest was recognized by the Buckminster Fuller Institute last year. It's one of the finalists in their challenge, which recognizes holistic systems design approaches to solving global problems. And in our case, we started with bonobos, and what we're ending up with is major solutions that are helping to mitigate climate change and poverty, as well as species extinction. And on the awareness front, we've worked with Congolese music stars. This slide seems to have a life of its own. This is Werison, who's kind of the Michael Jackson of the Congo. He's done radio spots for us. Papa Wemba's done songs. And now we're working on bringing the message out internationally. We've really focused all of our attention for over a decade in the Congo. And it's critical that we raise awareness and more support globally, to support everything that we've been able to put in place so far. One idea that we're working on is a music festival and multimedia event called Live Ape. And we're also planning to launch a crowdfunding and multimedia, awareness campaign on social media. So this fall with the book coming out. Appreciate it if you all will like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And just in closing, one of the things that we've done to prepare for this campaign is we did some man-on-the-street interviews in Central Park recently, where we're just, going up to people, excuse me, do you know what a bonobo is? You ever heard of a bonobo? And really 9 out of 10 didn't know, or if they did, they had some pretty funny responses like, oh, they're the gay monkeys, aren't they? But my favorite one was after we'd finished filming, we went to a bar, and we're sitting there, and the camera's still on, and we asked the waitress, do you know what a bonobo is? And she kind of, rolls her eyes, and she said, I'm really not sure. Let me go ask the bartender. So on that note, here's to bonobos.
Well, thanks, Sally, and that was definitely, right at the 3-minute mark, and I'm buying you a bonobo right after this. And I'm really glad that that the work that you're doing in Africa affects us all, because it is really one world, one atmosphere, and we must protect the rainforest, not only in Brazil, but also in the Congo. And so, Louis, on that note, maybe you can just kind of dial into, how your work is now really going towards that very point of preservation of the forest by protecting these animals that are under the threat of extinction.
Yeah, our tagline, I run the Oceanic Preservation Society. It's a very small organization, but our tagline used to be, we're not trying to save the whole planet, just 70% of it. And but then, you know, you realize that everything is connected. You know, what goes on in the ocean affects everything on land. So, you know, we're going after the other 30% on this one. But, you know, species is, I think, a great way to get people, you know, involved in climate change, you know, because it's such a big subject. But when you start to create the links between birds and bonobos, and, you know, in my case, you know, people that love the oceans, it starts to, you know, bond emotionally to the species, and then ultimately their behavior. You know, I think awareness is great, but like what we really need is action. And that's the only way to create action, is to get people to change their hearts. And that's what we do with the films. That's what we do with our action campaign, is to get people involved. You know, so it'd be great to partner with you guys. You know, we worked together, I don't know what, I want to say like 35 years ago? Jesus. It's like, is this the same Dave Yarnold? I can't believe it. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, you know, it does come down to changing hearts and minds, and you know, a lot of the conversation yesterday and actually the whole summit has been about this reframing capitalism itself in terms of, you know, how do we place value, and you know, we talk a lot about consumers and customers, you know, and what are we buying? You know, what are these products that we're consuming? And if it is, in fact, the actual animals themselves and the forests themselves, then maybe we need to rethink that. And so, you know, in terms of, you know, the theme of this panel, you know, stand up you know, and really make it happen. Let's talk about the collaborative aspect of this summit, how we've been pushing that piece forward, you know, where our organizations are actually working together in order to, you know, change this this system that's really broken, and we're not even looking at it, you know. How do we do that? Just going.
You know, that's one of the things I wanted to mention, is that in thinking about this presentation today, I realized, you know, there's several partnerships that have come out of our day. We're now about to launch ecotourism, which sprung from connections made here. We've been testing NoCaro's solar batteries. I've been talking to a couple of other people here about potential partnerships. So and that's what I love about this summit. You know, it's really an incubator for game-changing solutions with people who are truly, you know, on the cutting edge. And Louis, I wish you'd come do a film about bonobos. I was just.
It takes me like 5 to 6 years to do a film. I got to think, how many years do I have? How many more subjects do I have? You know, I could have about half a dozen other projects just out of this, you know, potentially coming out of our day. It's like, you know, I got to really choose carefully. I mean, it's a great. I mean, the thing is, everything's a great film. A couple of people are in the hallway saying, "Oh, we should. You know, I wish you would have just expanded on this more." Well, you know. Maybe they could do that film. I took a 3-day crash course before I went to Taiji to make The Cove. I mean, I had no filmmaking experience whatsoever. So, I mean, that should be a lesson to everybody here, that, you know, anybody can do anything, really. It's just hiring great people around you.
So, Chip, I think that the asking people to act, you know, I said this earlier, asking people to act out of passion and love is a really compelling way to create change. I think that we spend a lot of time talking about what the significance and the severity of the challenges that we all face. We all know that we have to do that. We have to agree that we have a burning platform, and that and that there should be a sense of urgency. But I think being able to connect people to the things they love, the things that are around them. It's one, you know, why Audubon can point to the most commonly found wildlife on the planet, the birds in your backyard, the birds that you can teach your kids about, the birds you can go down to the coastline and protect. Being able to connect people to things that resonate with them emotionally is one of the ways to make that initial sort of hardwired connection. We, as a movement, do a great job of talking to people's heads. We convince them about science, we convince them about data, and we don't talk to them enough about people's hearts. And actually, this panel is all about people's hearts. And I applaud AREDAY's ability to talk to people's hearts. Now, as Louis said, it's not enough to like a picture on Facebook. We actually want people to take action. So those actions will always vary. Building durable public will can be political will, it can be what happens in the voting booth, it can be the candidates you support, it can be the products that you buy, but we have to consciously talk about that. And that's why that last panel about media is so relevant, is that the whole definition of news is all screwed up. What the media reports and why they report it, it's all based on a conflict model and what's wrong and what's controversial. You could build an entire daily news report about what's right in the world if you wanted to. You could build, and I say this as a former editor. I used to run the San Jose Mercury News. And you could do that. The problem is that it's not a conventional structure, right? It's not a conventional approach to news, but you could do that. Consumers could like those news stories. And the thing about news right now is that you actually can determine what news is. If you vote for, if you like and click on the stories that are about people who make progress, people who make change, people who create hope, you'll get more of those stories. That'll happen.
Exactly. You know, we're getting down to the last 5 minutes in this panel, and I wanted to take this opportunity to engage the audience here. So is there mics out there for the folks to ask some questions to these esteemed panelists? And does anybody have a question? And please be brief to the point of the question. We really want to have these folks engaged on this, and maybe we don't have any questions, but I see one hand. Okay, great.
Well, I want to thank you all for putting this together in this way, and it just seems like from every panel we say more about education and media, and this is building and evolving in our day, and we're at a wonderful tipping point where through Impact AREDAY Films and all the filmmakers that are here and all the presenters that have such compelling stories that filmmakers could help empower all of their messages through moving AREDAY as an action plan with impact media behind it to events throughout the year. Nobody wants to go home. We want to keep moving forward. So what do you think about us having more regional events before next year? Who wants to wait a year?
Well, I think that's kind of, everybody's looking at me on the panel, and I'm like ready to go like this, but there's no. So actually, to that end, we are in dialogue with Wang Ming about some possibilities in China. We also are looking at Hawaii as a halfway point. We've been very interested in doing an event in Hawaii, in that that is an island nation that's becoming 100% renewable very quickly because they're being forced into it with the issues of bunker fuel and how you create electricity. And also we're working with Daniel and Marjorie, I see there, to do some things in Austria. So there's a lot of things that are on the table. We're also looking at possibly partnering with the Weather Channel on an event coming up in September in New York. So we're very active trying to keep this dialogue moving in various geographic locations. But we're also a very small organization with a very small staff. And so we really need the kind of support that everybody else has been asking for. So here it comes, folks. Ready? Drum roll. And if anybody would like to support AREI, you can go to the website, and there's a donate button there that says, if you put money in here, you can sleep better at night for doing your bit to save the world. But I think Louis has that same button, and so does Sally and David. And it's really, but it is really important that's a really important point, is that the those of us in the NGO world, those of us in the 501c3 nonprofit world, we work on donations. And I know that Louis' movie was funded by donation. And David's work and Sally's work, and it's so important that the, you know, I've heard the number $30 trillion is sitting in family foundations in the United States. You know, what's that money doing? You know, it's not deployed capital. And this is a big problem because, you know, we're trying to address the toughest, you know, issues facing all of us. So I think I'm going to stop there because I could probably talk for another hour on that and just have everybody has the last word. And let's start with Louis and go right down the line.
Oh boy, you know, I'm talked out. I feel like this is like a graduate course that it gets filled up, and it's like, you know, it's like almost time for a drink.
I think they're serving bonobos over there.
No, I mean, I just really, Chip, Sally, everybody, thanks for coming. It's really important that you support an organization like this. It's, I know it fills me up. We got a lot of the inspiration for the film that you saw last night from this conference. It's great for us to all be together, but it's, yeah, as we all know, it's more important what we do the other, you know, 362 days of the year. To go out and take everything we learned here in these other conferences and blow it out. I'm convinced that the people in this room alone in our networks are enough to save the planet. Really. No, seriously. Yeah. It's such a powerful group. Anyway, that's it. I mean, let's go do it, and next year come back and we'll just celebrate more. 5 years ago, there's the long faces in this room, like, oh my God, it's a lost cause, but we have to keep on charging on. We're going to lose, but let's keep on trying. It's a whole different tenor right now. It's like we already won COP21. It's just talking about, you know, how do we adjust for it? Let's celebrate a little bit. We did a great job.
Awesome. Okay, thanks. Sally?
Sure. Yeah, I hear you. And you know, last night, I'm sure I wasn't the only person crying through your film, but I was so grateful that you ended with solutions and action. And you know, in my work, you know, there's times when I've really felt, Jesus, I just can't go on. You know, this is, you know, it's just no way. And there is a way. And the cool thing about what we're doing is that, you know, the Congolese themselves are got to be the most resilient people I've ever known. You know, they are always looking at the opportunity, the next way to solve the problem and go forth. And you know, I think that would be the take-home message from this discussion is that, you know, every single person can make a difference. Whether you're helping to spread the word and raising awareness or whether you're really getting in there, hopefully, with some action. You know, that's what it's going to take. And I'm just uplifted to be with people who are taking action. Thanks.
Great. And David, you have
Wow, the last word.
You have the final word.
Tell hard truths. Tell hard truths to power, and remember that people are hungry for hope. People are hungry for hope.
Great. Well, we'll leave that with the hope. Thank you.